What's up, you little goobers and goblins? How have you guys been? We're back with another episode of Terrible Ways to Die, because you guys seem to enjoy that last one a whole lot. The last video, we kind of focused on medieval-esque torture methods that would eventually lead to the death of their victims, which is super interesting. Don't get me wrong, I love that. Absolutely love it, baby. But today we're gonna take another direction and other interesting ways to die. So go ahead and strap in, princess. But I hope everybody's been good. Things have been all right over here. Just been working a lot of doubles. You know, for some reason I can't say no when they're like, hey, can you work today? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Which it sounds terrible, but it's like, do I want to get paid to sit at work? You know, get paid to sit around at work, or do I want to sit at home for free? Because most of the stuff I need to do at home, besides like general chore and things like that, I can do at work, like edit and make videos, whatever. Any hoozle, I hope things have been well for you and going all right, and the ever looming dread that hangs over you hasn't been too unbearable lately. But let's get started. So first on our list is erotic asphyxiation. Now, I know this is called a terrible way to die, and I know most of you freaky little heathens like being choked while slapping hams, but let's talk about what happens when you go a little too hard in the paint and purchase yourself a first-class ticket to the afterlife. For those of you in this good Christian Minecraft server who like to stay pure for the good man above, erotic asphyxiation is when you purposely restrict oxygen flow to your brain for the, what am I trying to even say here? God, Jesus, for the purpose of sexual arousal. And autoerotic asphyxiation is when you do it to yourself while you're jorking it. And by jorking it, Borges is in a box right now, and by jorking it, I mean your paintus or flicking your beansters. Which I can't sit here and judge you by any means, because like I like it too. I have your throat here. Hold on, you can't really see it. I have your throat here tattooed on my hand, so no one's judging you here. This is a safe space. Moving on. And since I know myself, as well as y'all, are all children of God in this good Christian Minecraft server, you might be asking yourself, why on God's green earth would anyone want to do this to themselves or others? And that's because the hallucinogenic state that comes with experiencing hypoxia can, according to researchers, be somewhat enjoyable. It oftentimes causes the sensation of euphoria and a good old brain-blasting head rush. Now, the practice of autoerotic asphyxiation has been documented as well. I don't know if I put autoerotic in there or if it was just erotic asphyxiation, but if autoerotic asphyxiation exists in this time period, then I would imagine erotic asphyxiation exists in this time period. Does that sound correct? I don't know. I'm not an expert. Anyways, it's been documented as early as the 17th century, first being used as a treatment for erectile dysfunction, which is pretty hilarious. Can you imagine you're like going to the doctor and the doctor's like, well, your Johnson can't get up. I'm going to go ahead and prescribe 2 hands around your throat. It stated that the idea that this would cure erectile dysfunction came from people observing individuals who were brought to death via hanging, as they often noticed that the deceased, once hanged, had a fully torqued hog. Autoerotic asphyxiation has caused a number of accidental deaths over the year, psychiatrist.com claiming that they range from around 250 to 1,000 deaths a year in the United States, or 0.5 million inhabitants per year. And for some reason, these deaths are predominantly white dudes. What a way to go, though. Someone finds you, rose toy or hog in hand. That is embarrassing. Next on our list, and one of the scariest in my opinion, is death by cave diving. Now, obviously you're not going to just die from going into a cave, even though that's how I feel sometimes, even though I've never been really in an actual cave in my entire life. Conditions or complications during your expedition are what's going to take you out, but it sounds scary as hell. The number of fatalities from spelunking have dropped significantly over time. Let's see, the NIH reporting in 2016 that the rate has fallen from 8 deaths a year to around 3, but it's still a very real possibility, so don't rule it out. While dying while spelunking sounds awful, we won't even begin to think of the absolute horrors that come with underwater spelunking. That shit is scurry. I mean, like, what? Why are you gonna see a dark cave filled with water and be like, I gotta check that out. I don't know what it is, but I gotta go in there. That is some advanced level of whiteness. An advanced level of whiteness that I do not possess. I like myself above the ground until it's my time to go permanently below it. But like I said, spelunking doesn't take as many lives as you think. Like, every time you think of cave diving, you think of tragedy and horror, or, well, I do at least. I'm just projecting onto you. But it 99% of the time doesn't happen that way. But every time you hear of someone dying in a cave, it sounds horrifying. One story you've probably heard of is the death of John Edward Jones in Nutty Putty Cave. So in 2009, Jones was crawling around, I believe he was a med student, he was crawling around Nutty Putty Cave, which is a cave in Utah. I think it's just west of Lake Utah, I can't remember. But from my understanding, it's a pretty narrow cave. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, never been in a cave in my entire life, especially this one. I don't really know shit about spelunking, so again, if something I say is incorrect, let me know, and I will recant and correct my statement. So I'll also leave up some pictures while I talk to kind of give you a general feel of what happened to this man, because it is one of the most horrifying things I've ever heard. Anyways, Jones seems to have gotten turned around a bit, and in the cave there is a portion called the birth canal, if that gives you any idea how narrow this thing is. It's called the birth canal, and that's kind of used as a turnaround point to take you back to the entrance. Now, Jones believed that he was at the birth canal, and he entered in this weird, like, 90-degree turn head first, which turns out he was not at the birth canal. He was not at the turnaround point. He had just entered a passage known as Ed's Push, and became stuck headfirst upside down in a narrow fissure that measured around roughly 10 by 18 inches, which is tiny as hell. So Jones ends up spending 27 hours upside down in that fissure, which sounds, again, like a freaking nightmare. Various spelunking experts and emergency services were attempting to rescue him around the clock, but he was just so perfectly stuck that nothing they tried was able to wedge him free. From what I read, Jones was pretty delirious near the end, talking about seeing angels and demons before going into cardiac arrest and ultimately dying. I did also see that they had hooked up an IV to his leg that was sticking out of, like, the space he was stuck in, and they were administering him drugs to keep him calm throughout the end of his life. So I guess, like, that's good, but still, what a horrible way to go. I read someone who was called, an article from someone who was called in, and they talked about, you know, kind of being there near the end, and they could hear him breathing, and it's all gurgled because, like, he's been upside down, and fluid is getting in his lungs, and it just sounds like an awful way to go. After Jones got stuck in Nutty Putty Cave, if I remember correctly, they did seal the entire cave up, so nobody can go in it now. But just reading about that story and seeing those diagrams, like, made me feel claustrophobic. Like, it made my skin crawl. It sounds like actual hell on earth. Toothless, you want to say hi to everybody? You want to say hi to everybody? Give him a little meow. That's funny. That was good. I'm sorry. Moving on to the next death that I have actually researched pretty extensively in my free time and has given me I wouldn't say it's an irrational fear. I'd say it's a perfectly valid fear, and that is death by rabies. So a long time ago, I saw this video that, like, documented what happens when someone basically leaves rabies untreated, and the stages of what happens until they die, and it is horrifying. I believe it was, I cannot even remember like the name of it or anything. I just remember it being like 3 a.m. I was working the night shift and I saw it, and it left a permanent scar on my brain. So, like I said, it was like a medical video documenting, you know, a real rabies case, and they had this grim music behind it, which didn't help anybody. But yeah, it left a permanent mark on me. I have not been the same since, let me tell you. So for those of you that don't know for some reason, rabies is a fatal viral disease that attacks the central nervous system, causing like brain and spinal inflammation. Rabies is fatal. It is fatal. Will kill you, but it's also very preventable and with immediate medical attention. I think you can go a couple days without getting it looked at, but I think I read like once the symptoms start showing, you are up shit's creek without a paddle. So once you believe you've been exposed to rabies, you got to go to the hospital. You get a dose of the rabies immune globulin, which is a funny word, that last one, and then a series of 4 or 5 rabies vaccines, which got to be administered as soon as possible after exposure. The quicker they're administered after exposure, the more likely they are to be effective. Around 60,000 Americans each year have to go and get basically the rabies vaccines, and that has led to fewer than 10 deaths reported each year, though it is still a serious public health risk due to how lethal it is to humans. And fun fact for you, most of the rabies cases in the US come from animals with rabies, and 7 out of 10 Americans who die from rabies in the US contracted it from an infected bat, surprisingly enough. I know what you're thinking, but Snacks, what happens if I get bit by an infected animal and don't get treatment? Well, my sweet summer child, you fucking die, and in like the worst way possible. Once the virus progresses, it starts to wreak havoc on your nervous system, and you are conscious for the entire thing. It leads to insomnia, confusion, agitation, delirium, hallucinations. The virus literally changes your nervous system so it can effectively kill you better. Patients will start to convulse violently. Like I said, they'll have hallucinations. They will also hypersalivate, which doesn't sound terrible, but the problem is you also become hydrophobic. So the minute you try to swallow that saliva that's building up in your mouth, your throat closes and contracts violently, and you expel it. It does not sound fun. In the video, I vividly remember in my head, the man just looks like he's in his own version of hell. It sounds just god-awful. So the only good part about dying from rabies is that it takes you around 7 to 14 days to die. It's fairly quick, if that's what you want to call quick, but it is a grueling 7 to 14 days. Whatever number we're on is death by dehydration. Now, water is the key to life. The body can survive without food for an estimated of 50 to 70 days before eventually keeling over and expiring. Well, it only takes about 3 days without water or liquid to be fatal. I threw in that liquid part because I know one of you are going to be like, but Snacks, you only drink zero sugar Monster and you're still alive. Ha 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 ha. How about you leave me and my delicious elixir of the gods alone, because I don't judge you for how many Dr. Peppers you drink, do I? Thank you very much. Anyways, there's plenty of variations that go into how long someone can survive excuse me, without food or water, because even though most humans are relatively the same biologically, it really just depends on the person. So kind of to help to describe this to you, I'm gonna read an excerpt from William Langweish's book. I think that's how you say his last name. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but it's from his book, Sahara Unveiled, A Journey Across the Desert, where he describes death by dehydration. He says, first you ration your water, and then in parentheses it says, do not do this, drink your pee, then your own blood or that of your companions, then what's left of your gasoline, and then parentheses it says, apparently the local Beduinians shrug and say at least it keeps you off the battery acid, which, good God. Without water, your blood thickens, your skin turns black and shrivels like a mummy's. Your brain begins to shrink. Your lips shrivel to nothing, your tongue dries like jerky. You can't drink your own blood anymore because nothing seeps out when you cut yourself. Blood is moving so sluggishly, your heart goes into overtime, desperately trying to keep it circulating. Your kidneys don't have enough water to filter the blood, so they begin to fail, along with other organs, which are overheating by straining so hard to function, causing waste buildup in your cells. Parentheses, you don't contain enough water to poop. Your organs are cooking inside your body. You're being poisoned by your own poop. Your big wet brain is desperately osmosing water out of the body, shrinking the organ to a hard little baseball that cannot function with anything like cognition anymore. Once it fails entirely, you are dead. And that to me sounds like a series of no thank yous. And lastly on our list today is, I'm gonna have to read this one. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. Man, nailed that. Don't even have to say it again. It's also known as Munchenmeyer disease, aka Stoneman disease, or formerly oh my god, myositis ossificans progressiva. I don't know. Thanks, Wikipedia. Anyways, I remember learning about this disease, and just like everything else we covered, it sounds like a nightmare. I say that, but we're literally covering living nightmare, so there it is. It's one of those diseases that when it takes hold, like if I personally had it and like I started experiencing symptoms of it, I would be like, all right, just take me out back and put me down like a dog. But luckily this disease is extremely, extremely rare. So you probably don't have to worry about it unless maybe you got it. I don't know. I feel like most of the people watching now, if you got it, you would know. So Stoneman disease is a connective tissue disease, in which your connective tissue, such as your muscles, your tendons, and your ligaments, start to ossify. Don't know if that's a real word, but I'm going to use it anyways. Which in layman's terms means that your muscles, tendons, and ligaments slowly start turning into bone, which sounds made up. I know you probably don't believe me, which I get it. I'm just some guy on the internet and you are someone just trying to pass the time. I can understand the mistrust there. But go ahead, if you don't believe me, take a gander at this skeleton of a man named Harry Eastlack who suffered from this disease. Looks absolutely horrifying, doesn't it? See, I wasn't lying to you. So this disease is caused by a mutation of the ACRV1 gene, which from what I read, is a protein that is important in the bone morphogenic protein pathway, which is responsible for the development and repair of the skeletal system. God, humans are weird, bro. So complex, but just so fragile. The bonification, as I like to call it, happens sometimes spontaneously or when there's tissue that has been damaged. In certain cases, like minor injuries can cause joints to become permanently fused, as the body will take that damaged muscle tissue and basically replace it with new bone formation. And then the new bone formation forms a secondary skeleton and progressively restricts the patient's movements. And it's also not like, oh, the bone that's formed by this disease is kind of like your regular bones, but it's got different characteristics. No. It is straight up just identical to your regular bone. So like the bone in your arm, say you tore your muscle, your body would begin repairing that muscle with more and more bone. And let's say that happens and you're like, okay, I need to get this fixed. So you go in and have surgery and they remove those pieces of bone that are growing over your tissue. Guess what your body replaces it with? Guess. That's right, more bone. Eventually, the new bone growth will replace, your musculature, and it will fuse with your existing skeleton, leaving the patient locked in place, which is why it got the nickname Stoneman syndrome. From what I read, with proper medical management, the median age of survival while having this disease is around 40 years. Like I said, though, luckily, this disease is extraordinarily rare, extraordinarily uncommon. It only occurs in about 1 out of 2 million people. So we can all take a deep breath. And like I said, I'm 29, if you had it, you'd know by now. I also remember reading that some common indicators in children that are born with this disease have like extra bones in the joint of their big toe and stuff like that, or extra bones in the neck. So if that doesn't sound like you should be fine. But that concludes our second episode of Terrible Ways to Die. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any suggestions on horrible ways to die that sound like a real bumpskis, leave them in the comments below. If you have any other topics you want covered, I would absolutely love to hear them. Thank you guys so much for watching. We still stream on Twitch every night. We're still uploading daily videos, all that fun stuff. I'll leave the link to my other socials in the description of this video. But thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.